Welcome on into the Utah Blockcast. Man, it's been a minute since I said that. I'm Steve Bartle, Utah insider for KSL Sports. Like I said, it's been a while, and that is my bad. That's my fault. December is just a crazy month for me, and I always seem to find excuses to avoid recording, which is dumb of me, and I apologize to all of you listeners out there. So, my bad. My apologies. Let's get back to talking Utah athletics. Certainly plenty to discuss. And so, getting back into it, we've got plenty to hit on. I'll be diving into the offseason kickoff press conference that Utah football held on Tuesday with Kyle Whittingham, Jason Beck, and Morgan Scalley. A lot of stuff to take away from that. Obviously, the big topics from that: Cam Rising, Dorian Singer, NIL, Keanu Tanavasa, all of that stuff. Plenty to talk about with that. Plenty to take away and discuss, break down, all of that sort of stuff. So we'll dive into that. And then Utah basketball has figured some things out on the hardwood. But have they figured out how to knock off a team that is better than them? At least ranked higher than them, I should say. They'll have an opportunity on Saturday to prove whether they have or not against rival BYU. Utah has an opportunity to add a very good, quality, resume-boosting win against the Cougars at home. Cougars playing good basketball. I think they're ranked top 40, top 35, something like that. Utah struggled against these quad 1, quad 2 games. They've got an opportunity tomorrow to showcase their improvement. They've turned some things around, gotten 2 wins against Oklahoma State and TCU, and I think they've genuinely figured some things out. Offensively, defensively, the level of effort and physicality they need to play with, a certain brand of basketball they need to play. I think they've figured some things out, and now they'll be put to the test against a tough opponent in the Cougars, who they have talent. They've had their fair struggles. It's still a very good BYU team, and this is going to be a tough one. This is going to be a tight one for Utah. I think everybody's got it, whether it's BYU favored by 2, Utah favored by 2. This is a close game. Everything suggests and points to this being a pretty tight game, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes on Saturday. That game, it's unfortunate, man. Unfortunate. This is a ESPN Plus game. That's disappointing in a lot of ways. This should be a game that's ESPN2, ESPN. And unfortunately, it's ESPN Plus, but that's what we get when you've got 2 10-6 teams, 2-3 in the conference. That's what you get. So that'll be 7:00 tomorrow at the Huntsman Center. Bill Riley, Sean Moody on the call on ESPN 700. You can watch it ESPN Plus, like I mentioned. It's going to be a fun one, but on this one, so that's what we'll talk about on this episode. Break down a number of different things from the press conference, like I mentioned, and then we'll dive into to that basketball game. So going back to Tuesday, Kyle Whittingham, Jason Beck, Morgan Scalley met with the media, their first availability since the UCF game. Pretty wild. We did not get an opportunity to hear from Kyle Whittingham during the early signing period to talk about recruiting, and that's what this was mostly about, was talking about the roster, talking about recruiting. That's what it was. And then, Utah did us a solid and gave us Jason Beck, which also we needed an introductory press conference for, but also gave us Morgan Scalley, which I thought it was really good to hear from him as well. So with that press conference, I think the biggest thing that Utah fans took away from that, and we all took away from that, was the fact that it sounds like Cam Rising has officially moved on from Utah football. Kyle Whittingham didn't say it outright, but said things throughout his availability that certainly suggested that. He said something to the effect of Isaac Wilson is the only scholarship quarterback from last year's roster returning. He also said, this is a completely new room with Devin Dampier coming in, talking about him as a starter. And, he was asked point blank whether he knew what Cam's plans were. And he shared that Cam and him have talked a few times, that they're aware of where things are at, but that they'll allow Cam to announce, in his own time, what those plans are. So, I think it's important to take time to think back on the Cam Rising era. It went up with a bang and unfortunately came to an unceremonious end. He obviously came into his starting role in pretty tough situation. Charlie Brewer, that whole mess. But man, it was instant. His impact, his leadership, his play provided Utah an instant impact, instant difference maker. And he led Utah to their first Pac-12 title, followed it up with just an incredible performance the next year against USC in the Pac-12 championship game as well. And, those two Pac-12 titles have solidified his standing among the best quarterbacks in Utah football history. What he was able to do for Utah in his short time with the program, obviously he joined the program in 2019 and spent 5 years here. I shouldn't say it was a short time, but the scale of life, it was a short time with Utah football and with the NCAA. What's going on with that? It seems like players are going to be sticking around for a lot longer than 5 years. No, I'm just kidding. But with Cam, I think obviously his impact was felt significantly right away, and Utah owes him a lot, I think. He elevated the program even higher into national relevancy. They had been climbing slowly but steadily, after 2018 and 2019 with those trips to the Pac-12 title game with Tyler Huntley, Zach Moss leading those teams to the conference title game and coming up just short. Utah had risen to a point, and Cam was able to smash the door down on that championship and get Utah not just their first but their second as well. And I think that that's significant, not only for his legacy with Utah, but Utah's own standing in college football. I think it solidified their standing in the power conference realm. And it's unfortunate that the 2024 didn't go the way that many had hoped. Obviously, 2023 was a mess. We don't need to go dive back into that. I just think an unfortunate mess of a situation with him returning from a significant injury he suffered that same year. We all hoped that he would be back. Fortunately, he was not back, and I think we should have been much wiser in our expectations, and that's on me. I was one pushing, and Utah pushing that narrative that he was going to be back, and here I am talking about everything that I said I didn't need to dive into, but here we are. 2024, it's unfortunate. Obviously, the water cooler, damn that water cooler, and then again, 3 plays into the Arizona State game, he suffers another injury, and that was the last that we saw Cam Rising in a Utah uniform, unfortunately. Whatever Cam decides to do, he's a legend with Utah football, and he's put the program in a much better situation than the program he came and joined. And I think that's what the focus should be, is he elevated the program in his time here and elevated expectations and all of that. And I think that's all that you can really ask of players coming into a program, is to leave it better than what you found it. That's just something to live by in general. And I think Cam did that. Unfortunately, again, his injuries cost him the 2024 season and cost Utah an opportunity to compete at a really high level this season. And I think, that'll leave a sour taste in a lot of Utah fans' mouths, but it's not his fault. It's simply not his fault. Just to be clear, just to clarify that little bit. But obviously Cam gave a lot to the program, and so it's an unfortunate end to his time here at Utah. But I think a lot of people, there's been a lot of talk about Cam potentially becoming a coach, transitioning to coaching, and I think a lot of fans would love to see Cam, take on that sort of opportunity with Utah itself. So, we'll see what the future holds for Cam and for the program itself. But that was arguably the biggest takeaway from Witt's comments. Another big takeaway, obviously, with the transfer portal and the rivalry, Keanu Tanavasa, Cam Calhoun leaving the program. He was asked directly how much did NIL factor into those departures, and it led to Witt's response. But I think it was good for Witt to just be so forthright with his opinion. NIL was a factor for both Calhoun and Tanavasa. There's no way around it. It simply is what it is. I think Cam Calhoun benefited significantly from his time here at Utah, turning that into an opportunity to transfer to Alabama, and a nice payday for him. A player like that could net 500,000 somewhere in there. About Keanu Tanavasa. Defensive line is a premium position in the transfer portal. Good player like Tanavasa, all the injury stuff and availability stuff aside, he's a player that could potentially demand 750,000, from a program, and I feel comfortable in believing that he got at least that at BYU. I've talked to folks that were engaged in that process, and feel comfortable that Keanu Tanavasa got a nice little payday from BYU, and obviously he has his personal reasons as to why he felt the change was necessary, and that. But the truth is that, look, hey, NIL was a factor here, and that's all that Witt was saying. And I think it was more so a factor for Calhoun than Tanavasa. I think that is something that Kyle tried to suggest with his comments. He certainly had acknowledged that Tanavasa had his personal reasons and all of that, and I think that we all understand that, right? We all understand that. So, no surprise, but he was asked point blank, how much did NIL play a role in that? And, he responded as he should, and just acknowledged it. And that's it. That's all that we need to do and move on. And look, with Utah's NIL situation, they'd love to bring everybody back, but that's just not the reality in college football right now. Utah has a great culture, and I think that was a big point of emphasis from coaches, from all three coaches, was the culture at Utah is still strong. Kyle Whittingham, Morgan Scalley, even Jason Beck talked about the culture being strong, or being something that drew Jason to Utah, was the culture, was the competitive culture, the culture of success at Utah. And I think that was really good to hear from the coaches themselves. There's been a lot of criticism of the culture over the last couple months, and I think it was just good to have that. They have their nucleus of players that they're going to build with in 2025. And I think, Devin Dampier coming in, he's going to be a catalyst in that. He's going to be key to kind of reinvigorating the culture again, the fun sort of spirit that used to be really prevalent. And not to say that these guys aren't having fun, but I do think that when you reflect back on Cam's time, especially that first year that he took over in 2021, that was one thing that Cam brought to the table in spades, was just, kind of a fun, this sort of fun-loving attitude, right? He was super competitive. He loved competition, but he did it in sort of just with this always having fun, always um, just enjoying himself. And you could feel it. You could feel that sort of positivity that he brought to, media availabilities, that he brought around his teammates. You could really feel that. And I think Devin Dampier, haven't had the opportunity to talk with him directly, but in just talking with others about him, he has that. He has that sort of personality. And I think that can be really good for this program. And I think will be important for Utah is to just find that fun again. And I think that's going to be so important for Utah going into 2025. Building this culture, this competitive culture, but still having fun while we're doing it, right? I shouldn't say everybody, but obviously money is entered into the equation for a lot of these guys, but it's still important to have fun and enjoy it. Being a Chargers fan, a Los Angeles Chargers fan, obviously it sucked losing to the Texans last week, especially in the manner that we did. Justin Herbert having his worst game of his career last week, that hurt to see because he's been through a lot. And look, I'm going to cry on a Utah podcast about the Chargers, but bear with me here. It was tough and it sucks seeing that. But, in the aftermath, right, in the exit interviews and exit media availabilities that the media gets with the players, they all talked about the fun that they had this season under Jim Harbaugh. It really kind of reignited their passion for the game and reignited their just kind of competitive spirit. And I think that is so important for Utah to get back to that, to find that love and fun again. And I think that that can be accomplished with bringing in so many new players and I shouldn't say so many, but bringing in new coaches, right? I've talked about this a couple of times, in radio interviews and all of that. But I think, bringing in Mark Atuaya, bringing in Micah Simon, there's a new energy, a new passion, a new just appreciation for Utah. It's been really fun to watch, not to watch, but to see Mark Atuaya, his activity on Twitter and social media. Just simple things like that, I think, can be really good for the program. And with players coming into the program, again, there's a new appreciation for what Utah brings to the table, what Salt Lake City offers these guys. And that can be really good to have that sort of new blood. And so there's this balance, right, of hanging on to experience and hanging on to culture setters, leaders, but you also need this new blood. You got to find the guys that buy into your culture. And I think that's the process for Utah, is finding the guys that want to buy into the culture, that want to be a part of this. And I think Utah's, we'll see, obviously, we'll learn, but there's a lot of optimism that they've brought in guys that will help them kind of reestablish that fun atmosphere and fun culture. And I think, the competition, the competitive culture, the competitive spirit that these guys have, that's going to continue. With Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scalley at the helm, that's going to continue. That's never going to go away. But I think getting back to having fun, I think is an important thing for the program. As silly as that may sound, I think it is something when professionals talk about it. I think college students can also, we can talk about it with college students as well, college athletes, student athletes. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to say that. They might become minor league athletes here pretty soon with the way the NCAA is crumbling and falling apart. But that kind of gets me into the next point, Dorian Singer. I wanted to ask Coach Whittingham, what is the potential, what's that look like for Dorian Singer to return? I've heard good things. I've heard that Utah has received positive feedback on his waiver application. And with what we're seeing in the NCAA with Diego Pavia at Vanderbilt, the quarterback that kind of sparked all of this, with him getting a year of eligibility, we're now seeing others being granted waivers or an additional season of eligibility. There was a Southern Miss basketball player that just had, his was just granted like his ability to finish out the rest of the season, which he wasn't able to do previously, I guess. I read up on the details, but I'm blanking on them right now as I talk. But you're just seeing more of these cases around eligibility go in favor of the athlete. And I think for Dorian, you got to feel encouraged about what you're seeing with all of these other cases, going in the athlete's way. And, and if that is to happen, right, I think the big motivation for Dorian, obviously, and why he wants to return to Utah in 2025 is the opportunity to play with Devin Dampier. The two are brothers. They spent a lot of time together, and I think that's another thing that would certainly help is reestablishing this culture of fun. For the offense in particular, I think it would be a lot of fun to have Dorian and Devin playing together, with the way that Dorian played this past season with all of the QB issues. He was still fringe top 20 in terms of receiving production. He was in the top 15 for most of the season, but I think the last couple games, I think he slipped, and then not playing in a bowl game as well hurt him as well. But he was top 15 in terms of receiving yards and catches. Obviously, we need to get that touchdown number up from 1, but I think he would certainly benefit from having a quarterback that has the sort of confidence that Devin Dampier does. And I'm gonna go in depth into Devin Dampier, his game in the quarterback room, and all of that, in future episodes here starting next week. But I think there would be a lot of motivation, not motivation, but there would be a lot of fun for Dorian, obviously returning. And I think you have to be encouraged with what you're seeing as it relates to Dorian for Utah fans. Obviously, it's not. It's kind of worrisome with what's happening to college football and this evolution it's going through. We'll call it that. We'll be positive and call it an evolution. But there are certainly a lot of changes that will impact how this game, this sport, college football, will look and feel in the coming months, and I should say coming years, but potentially coming months. With the way that this is going, it might force the NCAA into collective bargaining much sooner than I anticipated it happening. I think, we'll see. That's getting into something that we don't need to dive into just yet. But in terms of some other takeaways from that press conference, I thought it was interesting. Utah has 30 guys in that joined the program at the mid-year point. That includes, I think, 16 freshmen and 15 transfers. Maybe it's the other way around, but they brought in 31 guys specifically, at the mid-year point. And I think that that's really good to have, those new faces in the program. Whittingham then mentioned that they'll bring in an additional 12 to 16, and that includes, the remainder of their freshman class, as well as return missionaries, and then potentially, a couple additions from the portal as well come springtime. And he made sure to mention specifically that running back position. They want to get to 6 scholarship running backs, and that could come in the form of the portal. That could come in the form of the junior college ranks. We'll see. But Utah does want to add another running back. Where else could they look at? I think everybody is interested in the defensive tackle room. And Morgan Scalley talked about this a little bit. They feel really good about the 3 that they have in Aliki Vomahi, Dallas Vakalahi, and Jonah Leahea, who has put on the weight. I know he's listed at 271. I think he's closer to 280 now. But he's a guy that they're really excited about. You bring in Carson Kafusi. I think he's a guy that, he can play right away. He's a guy that I think Utah would love to get on the field right away. He's 6'6", 286 pounds. Going back to last summer, he's playing offensive line for Skyline. Last offseason, he worked exclusively as a defensive lineman, in these camps and that sort of stuff. I had the opportunity to watch him up close in the ESPN, I forget what it's called, the Underclass Report or something like that. They have a camp here in Salt Lake City. They host it at Brighton every summer, and that brought out a lot of talent in the state of Utah. Aaron Dunn, Carson Kafusi, Mui Talau, Cyrus Polu, just all the guys that you want to be at that camp were there. And it provided us an opportunity to get a look at Carson Kafusi as a defensive lineman, and he impressed. He had a really, really good rep against Aaron Dunn. Went to the inside, had a nice little swim move, faked outside, went inside. Had good reps, bull rushing a couple, which is frowned upon in those settings. But he really impressed during that camp, and he then in talking to a couple sources, Utah had their elite camp, their invite only camp for prospects that they want to get a closer look at, and that was really kind of the thing that sealed the deal for him and Utah in Utah's eyes as a defensive lineman. He really, really impressed at that camp, and Utah was all in on him at that point. So Utah is really, really excited about him. And again, at 6'6", 286 pounds, he certainly got the numbers. In terms of his size, he'll need to obviously mature physically in the strength and conditioning program. But he's a guy that I think will be, and have thought this for quite some time. He'll be a guy in that rotation. Another guy joining the program, Semi Tawalunga, I think is going to be a guy that we'll see in the rotation potentially. We'll see, but certainly Carson Kafusi. I think Utah may also look to add to that spot in the defense, in the spring portal window. That'll be something to keep an eye on with that. And then, just in terms of what else they may look to address, obviously running back, you potentially add Dorian Singer to the wide receiver room. Defensive tackle, I think, is the biggest. Running back and defensive tackle, I think, are the spots that you have to add another player to, and then hope that Dorian gets that year back as well. So that's what we got from the press conference on Tuesday. Certainly more to break down from it as well, and we'll go from there. But shifting gears here, talking basketball, Utah-BYU Saturday, 7 p.m. at the Huntsman Center. Utah coming off of 2 straight victories. First one last Saturday at home against Oklahoma State, 82-63 win over the Cowboys. That got Utah their first Big 12 win. Shout out to Oklahoma State for providing the first Big 12 win in both men's basketball and football. Shout out to you guys. Appreciate you guys. And then they follow that up with a road win. What was it, 73-65 over the TCU Horned Frogs, same TCU Horned Frogs that beat BYU on that same floor the week before. So you're feeling good about what Utah is doing after going 0-3 and starting against Baylor, Texas Tech, and Iowa State, obviously 3 of the top contenders in the Big 12. That was going to be tough, but I think Utah genuinely learned some things about Big 12 basketball in those 3 games and have made some important adjustments that have really benefited them these past 2 games and are going to be paramount to their chances at a win against the Cougars on Saturday. I think first and foremost is the increased point of emphasis on getting good, if not better, looks on the offensive end, working for really good looks, scoring opportunities. The ball movement the last 2 games has been outstanding. There's been a number of plays where they've thrown it side to side, they've reversed it, they've swung it, made cross-court passes, swung it back to the original side, the play side, created opportunities for others inside. The ball movement from bigs to bigs has been really good as well. Keanu Dawes and Lawson Lovering have a little thing working right now between those two. I think between those 2, they have probably 4 or 5 assists to one another. And I think, just the ball movement itself has created a lot of scoring opportunities inside. And I think that's been the big point of emphasis over the last 2 games has been, taking advantage of aggressive defenses and, back cutting, getting to the rim, making these teams pay for playing aggressive defense on the perimeter. You get it inside. And I think too, right? Utah kind of settled into their reputation as a 3-point shooting team. And, I kind of liken it to a football team that falls in love with the throw game, right? You fall in love with the throw game, you're throwing it around, but you've got to still run the ball. You have to force teams to defend, inside, and to defend the run game, to play on their toes and not on their heels, right? And I think that's essentially what we've seen with Utah basketball is they've found their run game, and that's scoring inside at the rim. And right now, I think defenses have really keyed in on taking away the perimeter for Utah, and Utah has now countered by getting looks at the rim from their bigs. And so, eventually teams are going to adjust, they're going to counter and work to take away scoring at the rim, and that's going to open up opportunities on the perimeter, more cleaner looks for their 3-point shooters. Utah's really struggling right now from behind the arc. I think they're at the bottom of the Big 12 conference, converting, I think, like 28% of their 3-pointers right now. It's really bad. Utah's got to clean that up. They got to improve that number because, eventually you're going to need that to counterbalance the inside scoring. And so I think that's been a big key is Utah's establishing their run with the inside scoring. You got to do that to open up the play action, the 3-pointer for them down the road. And perhaps that we'll see that against BYU. And with BYU, I think it's going to be important for Utah in particular to hit the offensive glass. BYU is a really good rebounding team in the sense that they eliminate offensive rebounds for opponents. I think currently they're grabbing 81% of all available defensive rebounds, which is a really good number. I think opponents are averaging about 4 offensive rebounds per game, just in general. And in losses for BYU, they've given up about 9 offensive rebounds per game. So I think it's going to be important for Utah to continue to work their offense, continue to look for opportunities inside. They will be there. But also I think it'll be important for Utah to hit the offensive glass and attack this team and work for second chance points. Utah has done really well, in terms of grabbing offensive rebounds. I shouldn't say really well, but they aren't afraid of hitting the offensive glass. I'll say that. And so I think, that's going to be a key for Utah. They have to, clean the glass defensively and then work for offensive rebounds, and get those second chance points. Another key factor in this game for me, I think, is continuing to get to the free throw line. Utah has struggled this year from the line. They're not a great free throw shooting team, at least in terms of what the numbers say. I do think this team is capable of shooting a much better percentage, and I think they're just kind of in their heads right now. But in general, I think Utah has to get to the line, and I think you want to see that because it speaks to, again, that aggressive mindset of getting good looks, getting opportunities at the rim, being aggressive, being in attack mode. I think you want to see Utah continue to get to the free throw line at a really high rate. In terms of, number, you want them to be around 35% free throw rate, and you want them getting 20-25 free throw attempts. And with the way that they've played offensively the last 2 games, that's been pretty easy. They attempted 24 free throws against Oklahoma State and 29 free throws against TCU. You do that on the road, that's really impressive. Now do it at home against your rival BYU. Get to the rim, draw fouls, get to the line, and be aggressive in that way. So I think that's going to be important. And then too, I think, with this game, with this game, I think, getting to the rim will be key for Utah. I mentioned that BYU is good defensively, but they currently give up, 59% shooting to their opponents, which isn't necessarily bad, but Utah is limiting opponents to 52% in terms of shooting close twos. And so I think you have an opportunity there to get it inside. Obviously, they have Kebakeda and some length, guys with size, but I think Utah can get it inside and convert a number of opportunities, at the rim. That's going to be important for them. I think they can. It's going to be whether they do or not, and I think that's going to be the key for Utah. So, obviously, this is a big game for both programs. A lot of storylines between the two, a lot of connections between the two programs. Obviously, with Chris Burgess and Kevin Kada, spurning Utah for BYU. There's certainly going to be some added motivation for Utah, some added motivation for the fans to show up and to make it loud, to make it, to voice their displeasure and all that. I hope that we get a packed Huntsman. I know there have been a lot of people promoting tickets and buying tickets, and I hope that we see the Huntsman packed. I hope that we see that, these two teams are certainly deserving of that. This game is deserving of a packed crowd, packed house, and I think we're going to get a really, really competitive game. So you're going to get your money's worth. I think this is going to be a competitive game, and I think Utah has a really good shot at pulling off the win against, at least on paper, a more talented team. They've invested a lot of money into that team, and I think Utah has a really good chance at getting a win here at home against BYU. So, with that, going to get back into recording more consistently. That's been my New Year's resolution, is recording more consistently, and a big key to that is I want to hear from you guys. I want to get back to hearing from you, from incorporating your thoughts, your opinions, whether you share them on social media, you email me, whatever it is. Share your thoughts and your takes with me on Twitter, and I want to be sure to incorporate more of your voice and opinions into the Blockcast and into the show. So we'd love to hear from you guys about the BYU basketball game, as well as any other thoughts that you might have, but would love to get your thoughts and opinions on the game. And again, with this, going to record more consistently. So the next episode on Monday, I'll start my look ahead for Utah football in 2025. I'll dive into Utah's signing class. We'll go more in depth in what they brought in, how they addressed certain positions. Then we'll do an in-depth breakdown on the quarterback room and how that looks. And we'll do that with each position moving forward, but we'll start with the quarterback position specifically on Monday. So appreciate all you listeners, appreciate KSL Sports, and looking more forward to more episodes, more Blockcast in 2025. Again, appreciate you all. Thank you so much. This has been the Utah Blockcast.